Hi, I'm Edwin Samuelson, and welcome to the CineFiles. This week, it's a very, very special show. It will be the first of a three-part series on the new James Bond series. Well, not the new James Bond series, but it's going to tie in with the new James Bond film, which is Casino Royale, and the new DVD releases of all the first 20 films of James Bond. But before I begin, I want to introduce my panel. To my left, Mr. Eric Cohen, and to his left, Mr. Michael Foltz. But anyway, before we begin, let's get ready to talk about, well, actually, let's begin. The James Bond series. Let's start out. James Bond, the original superhero, I guess say secret agent who started...
Super spy.
The
original action hero.
Yeah, Bond. I'd probably say the longest running film series in history.
Quite possibly the most influential film character.
Definitely up there. Everyone has parodied James Bond at one point or another.
There isn't an action film that hasn't somewhat been inspired by James Bond.
And let me tell you, James Bond was more influential back in the old days than you think, because when Alfred Hitchcock made North by Northwest, he went on record by saying that that was how he would do James Bond.
North by Northwest came out in 1957.
I know, but when he was interviewed later, they talked about him doing a Bond film, he said, I have already did my Bond, and it was North by Northwest.
Okay. Wow. And also I want to say about
he was a seer.
You're wrong.
Another thing interesting about James Bond, I guess you could say, it started a new genre, the super spy movies. In fact, there were so many knockoffs. In fact, there was a film, I don't bet you guys didn't know this, that Sean Connery's brother actually played a secret agent in. I don't know the name of the film.
Operation Kid Brother, I think it was called. Neil Connery.
Hey, if you can't get Sean Connery,
why do I know
get
that?
The next best.
I'm embarrassed.
And the kid actor in it that played his sidekick was Don Swayze.
That's an inside joke for some people, and it's not very funny. So.
And you're laughing.
I'm laughing. I'm laughing in pity of myself. All right. Well, anyway, the first film.
Matt Helm was a knockoff.
Yes, he was.
A Man Called Flint.
Yeah, Our Man Flint and Mike Flynn.
Coburn and Michael Caine, respectively. But the first film actually is Dr. No. The first film that Henry Saltzman and is it Albert Cubby Broccoli wanted to film was Thunderball, but they had problems with the rights, which we'll get to later. So they decided to film Dr. No with an unknown actor.
That is incorrect.
That is incorrect.
I'm going to set the record straight on this.
It says that in the documentary.
By the way, yeah, Eric is our resident James Bond
expert. Is a official
Even though we're huge fans, he's the expert.
Go ahead, Eric.
No. What they wanted, this is the deal. Thunderball was supposed to be the first James Bond movie, but this was before Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman were even involved in it. What happened was Kevin McClory, I forgot who the other producer, came to Ian Fleming and said, we want to make a James Bond film. And at the time, Bond was sort of a popular fictional character, and they decided to get together and they wrote a script together, which turned out to be Thunderball. Now, what happened was the film fell apart, and Fleming needed a new idea for a novel. So his next novel became Thunderball, hence why all this legal wrangling went on. Since then, he kind of did the novel without getting any credit. The other screenwriter, I think his name was Jack Whittingham or something like that.
I believe that's right. It is
right, and that's the deal. That would have been the first James Bond movie, but it wouldn't have had anything to do with the Broccoli and the Saltzman guys.
And not only
those
that,
guys came in.
I don't think they'd be able to afford the budget.
Dr. No that's the film they selected to be the first one because they thought that would be the most cinematic.
And it also was I guess you could say, could be a pretty low budget film because it wasn't as spectacular as the later Bond films.
And I love Dr. No.
Dr. No is a very different Bond film compared to the other ones.
It's fascinating because it's the first one. They don't quite have the formula yet.
They don't have the theme song during the opening credits, it's more of a beatnik type song.
The themes, the
Three Blind Mice.
The song opens with the James Bond theme, and then it turns into Three Blind Mice.
Yeah, but I mean
the
song
versus the theme by what's his name?
Monty Norman.
Oh, you're talking about? Okay, I thought you were talking.
I'm talking like the woman, and
no, they
title
don't.
sequences.
No, but they don't have that stuff. But it's still quintessential Bond. What's fascinating about the film is, although it has its fantastic elements, it's basically what Fleming wanted his books to be, basically a British Mike Hammer.
Well, what is interesting, too, is that Sean Connery, as we all know today, is a superstar because of this film, was actually not even, he was really way down the list of choices, wasn't he?
Fleming wanted David Niven. And when Sean Connery was cast, Ian Fleming was very angry and said Sean Connery reminded him of a cab driver.
Well, he was in Mr. Universe, and he was suggested by, I believe, Cubby's wife after she saw him in Garby O'Gill and Little People. And Sean Connery is the...
This is also demythologizing. Is that the word?
How about declassified?
The fact of the matter was, Connery in England at the time wasn't not famous. He was already somewhat a well-respected theater actor. He was already done a lot of television. He'd done like a bunch of Shakespeare on TV and stuff like that. So it wasn't like he was this guy that came out of nowhere, was just a Mr. Universe. He had some acting chops before he played Bond. It's just that to international audiences he was unknown.
Really? Well, I like Dr. No a bit because, I mean, you have the definitive James Bond, in my opinion, Mr. Sean Connery, and you also have Joseph Wiseman as the bad guy.
Great actor.
Very good actor.
You're nothing but a cop, Mr. Bond. Great line.
And I also love that it has probably one of the most influential sequences in a Bond film, which has been repeated a few times, which is honey riders emerging from the oceans. Iconic image. In fact, it's been parodied in what is it, Austin Powers. In fact,
it's been parodied in the Bond films.
Yes,
right.
and Die Another Day
too.
And in fact, it was just parodied in Casino Royale.
Yes.
But
they subverted it. They subverted it.
But how does
I think that's enough.
How does this?
Two homages enough.
How does this rate on the James Bond scale for you? I mean, do you think it was a good template for the series as a whole?
I think it's honestly, it's one of my favorites. I mean, I would say the first 3 Bond films are my favorite Bond films. I think it's a fascinating one because it's the first one. There's things about it that I really like, which you never see ever again in a Bond film. Like I love Connery's first initial interpretation of the character. He's such a bastard. I mean, he's just such an arrogant, cocky, racist bastard.
Just
in this
as
film.
the novels were.
And it's fascinating because this film was made in 1961, and they're just not afraid to make him a bastard. I mean, you've heard all this lore about how they prompt the censorship.
He is in the films.
Oh, to Quarrel, he's like, fetch my shoes. You know, he just treats them like utter shit.
The Ian Fleming books are very racist.
And the books are very racist.
Very racist.
I was going to say he's much more sexist than he is racist, I thought.
Well, he's both. He's just an arrogant bastard. They said it's Ian Fleming. That's his character, you know, as the secret agent.
And it's interesting how in the series they kind of softened the character as it became more popular. You know, because like the first 2, like we'll get into Fresh Love later, but in the first one, I mean, it's just the way, you know, he just shoots a guy in the back, and you heard the stories about how they're afraid of the censors. Will they be able to get away with that?
He's more cold-blooded. He's more cold-blooded, I would say.
Completely ruthless in this one.
And he uses his license to kill. In the other films, you know, he would just knock a guy out.
And he's more of a detective in this one too, which is kind of interesting.
And I also like the one thing I thought was very interesting is that they had like a little bit of folklore in the movie where there's a dragon is attacking the island, you know, which you find out later is not what it appears.
Well, they kind of done that later once, Live and Let Die with the voodoo stuff and things like that.
But it's a very good film. It's different, but keep in mind it is very different from the James Bond films that followed it.
It is very dry.
But
Joseph Wiseman is a good villain in Dr. No. Honey Rider is okay. She kind of plays an idiot. She's not... I like my Bond girls smart. Not exactly the brightest bulb on the ceiling.
And that's Ursula Andress.
I view Dr. No as a very dry film. It's enjoyable. I love the appearance of Quarrel. I thought he was a great character. But I think it's very, very dry.
Well, one thing, too, I want to mention, too, is there is no Q in this film. The gadgets are very, very limited. And... it's different.
Are they
technically there is a Q in the film?
I'm sorry, I take that back.
But it's Major Boothroyd.
It's a different
it's not
actor.
Desmond Llewellyn.
Which actually is the character in the Q in the books is Major Boothroyd.
Who we find out.
Major Boothroyd, and if you ever see Dr. No, he's a character that comes out and gives Bond his Walther PPK at the beginning of the film.
He's Mr. Gadget, as people will refer to him who don't know his name. But anyway, that film started the series and was pretty successful, and it was enough to spawn a sequel. And the next film was chosen after John F. Kennedy named it one of his favorite books, correct?
Yes.
The book is From Russia with Love. And in fact, recently, it is so influential, it got just today's audiences, it was transferred into a video game with Sean Connery reprising his role as the most famous secret agent ever, Mr. James Bond. And it followed the movie very closely. From Russia with Love is considered by many to be one of the finest James Bond films. In fact, it's considered to be Sean Connery's best film, if I'm not mistaken.
And I will say, for my money, it's one of the best. Probably my second favorite Connery Bond. And I'll tell you one reason why. The main reason why.
Robert Shaw?
Robert Shaw's fantastic. And you know why Robert Shaw's fantastic? And you hardly ever see this in the Bond films, which I would like to see them get back to. What they're doing now, I have no idea. But I love the idea of a physical and mental equal to Bond, and that was Robert Shaw's agent, the Russian agent. What was his name in the film?
His name is Red Grant.
Red Grant. I love Bond having a nemesis that was just as smart and just as good a fighter. You could tell they were like physical equals.
Even tougher. Even tougher, in
I
fact.
don't know.
And I like
not necessarily, because Bond wins that.
And
So
I
you
also-
can't be tougher when you lose the fight.
what is the name of the I forgot, but there's a Russian woman.
Yeah, that's Lottie Lenya, the German actress who plays Rosa Klebb. I love From Russia with Love is probably my favorite Bond
She's a
movie.
great
I mean,
villain.
you're talking about Hitchcock. If Hitchcock made a Bond film, it would be like From Russia with Love. And From Russia with Love is probably, for me, it's the one Bond film where all the elements work. You know, where the direction, the writing, the acting, everything just kind of.
There's
right.
odd parts to it though too, like the whole thing with the cat fight with the gypsies.
It is odd, but that's
a little
part of
strange.
adds to the exoticism for me. It's a film that reminds you that this is an exotic adventure. And I love the whole Orient Express stuff, and it has what is probably one of the best fight sequences in the history of film, that down and dirty fight between Red Grant and Bond in the car of, in the cabin of the train. That's a bloodthirsty fight.
I love Robert
It's
Shaw.
spectacular. But both all three villains, he has little screen time. The Grand Master, I think I forgot the character's name, who's a chess champion, who's like the brains behind coming up with the scheme. In the novel, it's Smersh. Smersh is the Russian, the KGB arm. That was Bond's nemesis in the novels.
To me, it almost.
But other than that, the movie's pretty faithful to the book.
To me, it almost at the beginning reminded me, even though they didn't come out and say it, obviously, but it reminded me of the pre-Spectre. Like this was going to be the introduction to what Spectre was going to be all about, with the whole training ground, what they have, which was Smersh. But
well, you saw, I mean, Ernst Ravil Blofeld's there. You know,
yeah, exactly.
You don't see his
that
face
was
yet.
that was the pre-Spectre, and I love like the guy running away from the flamethrower and then throwing the knives and teaching hand-to-hand combat. And Red Grant's there, and Rosa Klebb puts on the coal miner's glove or brass knuckles and punches him right in the stomach.
The thing I like about the Red Grant character too is they allude to him that I believe he's mentally ill, or he was taken from an asylum and trained to be an agent. Is that correct? I forgot.
I don't remember
But
that.
there's something interesting about his character. I remember psychologically.
He's just a well, Robert Shaw just makes that character.
He's one of the best, most underrated, and best villains in a Bond film.
I say top 3 maybe.
Definitely.
And I'm having trouble thinking of the other 2. That's how good he was.
I love Robert Shaw, and that was probably one of the most
Great
famous
Bond
characters.
movie.
Great Bond film.
Then again, when was Robert Shaw ever bad?
It's a classy Bond film too. There's just a lot of respect to the storytelling and the performances. And Connery's great in it as Bond.
If you
He's
like-
a little more human than what he becomes.
If you
later
like
on in the
great
series.
characterization, I don't care in any movie, not just a Bond film, not in just a suspense/action film, but if you like great characterization, From Russia with Love is definitely the one to check out.
I think it's probably Sean Connery's best performance as Bond. Definitely up there. And because the first one he was a little rough because he was learning the character, but this one he really finds a fine balance of what we see in the later film.
That's a good point.
All right, well, Russia with Love, definitely one of the best. Check that one out. All right, well, let's bring us to our next film, which
Goldfinger?
Goldfinger, which was originally supposed to be also directed by Terrence Young, but unfortunately he had other prior commitments, and so the film was picked up this time by Guy Hamilton, and it's probably the most famous of the Sean Connery
It's the
Bonds.
most influential of all the Bond films.
Definitely.
Because it totally made the Bond series the way we're accustomed to seeing it today.
It was the biggest Bond at that time. It was the one
Right.
that
That's
the
the one
biggest
that
success.
really
Also-
blew the lid off the whole Bond craze.
It's also the one that started making the Bond theme song or the movie song that started carrying like a certain cachet to it. You know, with Shirley Bassey doing Goldfinger, and then all of a sudden doing a Bond song as a performer or performers became a big deal.
And people expected to see that every time they saw a Bond film because the song was so memorable.
It's also the first tongue-in-cheek Bond.
Yeah, it is.
And you know, for that kind of thing, I think it's one of the better Bond films. You know, there are two kinds of Bond camps. There are guys that like their Bond serious and down and dirty, and they're the kinds that like their, you know, kind of tongue-in-cheek, smirky, campy kind of thing. And I like them both as long as they're done well. And I think Goldfinger is definitely one of the best ones. I mean, it still holds up.
It's
Other
the
ones
first
tend
one.
to date.
It's the first one of the where it's I would say it's probably of the early ones. It's the best merging of the camp / seriousness, where it's not too serious and it's not too silly. Of course, when you have a movie that the lead bad girl or the Bond girl is pussy galore, come on.
Well,
It's very sexy actress.
Very good.
Very sexy.
Shirley Eaton, is that correct?
No, Shirley
sorry.
Eaton was the one that gets painted in gold. It's,
I'm so sorry. It's
what's her name? It was
Honor
the original,
Blackman.
Honor Blackman.
Yeah, that's right. And then you got Gert Frobe as Goldfinger.
Now we're talking about best villains. Gert Frobe and Oddjob as his henchmen are probably the two. I would say they're probably two of the
Oddjob,
best.
a.k.a. Professor Tanaka.
Yes. Hawaiian dude. Hawaiian, what was he? What was this thing? He was a sumo wrestler or something like
Professional wrestler, actually.
Professional
He was
wrestler.
a sumo wrestler, then went into professional
Right.
wrestling. Yeah.
Actually, no, he was a professional wrestler first, and then he went into acting.
But the thing I love about the whole Gert Frobe thing is he's so good at it.
Harold
and yet,
Sakata, by the way. That's not.
and yet
Toro.
Gert Frobe's entirely dubbed throughout the
Oh,
entire
yeah, you can
film.
tell, though. You can tell.
But it was a very good dubbing job, and I like that they took some of the most ludicrous ideas in the movie and made them somewhat believable. I mean, they're going to break into Fort Knox with the gas and all this stuff.
But it's a brilliant idea. I mean, they're not going to steal the
I didn't think it
gold.
was that ludicrous. I mean, when you get down the road in Bonds,
Yes,
that's when the
yes.
ludicrous
I'll take
ideas come
that
to the
back.
forefront.
I'll take that back.
I mean, everything seemed sort of plausible.
And I would say you talk about Connery's best performance as Bond. I think his performance in this one is equal to From Russia with Love. It's just a different take on the character. I mean, this is the first Bond film where he seems like he's having a lot of fun, you know, and he's starring that you could see like he's good in Thunderball, but then you can sort of see that okay, I'm getting sick of this. a little
Yeah,
bit.
because
10 minutes.
I could hear
Yeah,
10 minutes on the
yeah.
speaker here.
That
her
wasn't
that was the
good. That
voice.
wasn't
That was the
good,
voice.
Gloria.
That was the voice of God. Well, I would say Goldfinger. You can definitely tell it was from a new director too, because it's a different tone, as you said. But it's a very good movie. I like it. I think it's
a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun.
It's good. It's
If-
good. I don't know if it's in the canon of the great, but it's good.
It's definitely up.
I think it's in a canon. of the great.
Well, the next film, as we were talking about earlier, was Thunderball. Now, there's a documentary about it. It was probably one of the most anticipated films of its time because of Goldfinger. Because Goldfinger was such a huge success, they rushed Thunderball into production, and it was a really huge, elaborate production. And it was at the time the longest Bond film. And they brought back the original director, Terrence Young. And I find the film to be a mixed batch. You know,
It's all right. There's some really good things in it. I think it feels, you know, it's a weird film for me because you don't get too caught up in it. It's not as engaging as the previous ones for some reason. But there's some cool things like what's his name, the villain Largo.
Largo.
Should have been much more impressive.
He wasn't. He was Largo. To me, seemed like a real grumpy old guy.
Yeah, it was just
He
kind
was
of
somebody's grandpa that was power crazy.
The lamest of the Sean Connery villains. I would
But
say.
what I liked a lot about Thunderball is it was here we are finally introducing Spectre as the major villain. This was, this is where it came to the forefront as Spectre. I think there's a lot of fun. Thunderball to me is a fun film. It starts out, the name Thunderball is a great name. Second of all, the great theme song by Tom Jones.
Oh, God,
I
I'm
love
that
it.
one.
Thunderball is a great song.
I mean, how can you put Thunderball into a song and sing it like
I like it.
It's a great song, And here we start getting his gadgets really on full force. His little the pocket thing that he can breathe in, and the little submarine that he takes. And I thought the battle at the end was great.
I thought the battle went on way too long, and I was kind of bored because the middle section took so
I
too long to get
couldn't
to.
I couldn't disagree more because the agents parachuting in and then fighting the Spectre divers underneath and
only problem.
I like that quite a bit.
Pacing.
I sort of agree with you, and I sort of agree with you. The only problem I have with when Bond goes underwater, which has happened a lot in Bond films, is that it's really hard to tell who the hero is and who the villains. It just gets like visually. I just find it kind of annoying and
Especially
kind
when
of
it
painful
steals,
to watch.
especially when it steals one of the bad guy's suits, or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean,
not a suit. The hover. Or
I like Thunderball. I think it's a fun enough movie. I just don't think it's a particularly memorable one for the length and all that stuff. It should have been a lot better. It does feel rushed. It feels kind of sloppy in parts, like some of the special effects, some of the action.
I think your problem with it, and maybe Edwin, your problem with it as well, is compared to something like From Russia with Love or Dr. No, it's not the deepest of the Bond films.
Well, no. I mean,
it's unabashedly an action film.
Goldfinger isn't deep. I think Goldfinger is 1,000 times better than Thunderball.
I think it's just more fun. Thunderball.
It felt like they took more care with Goldfinger, whereas Thunderball sometimes feels like a badly dubbed movie to me.
Well,
all around.
I think think the weakest part of Thunderball is the fact that Largo is not a strong villain.
But there's great scenes in it. Like I love the scene where Connery's trying to escape from the bad guys, and he's going through that whole carnival thing, and he's slightly wounded, and he actually looks scared. I think that's a very impressive looking sequence. You know, there are really good things in it, and I like how he's like always sort of showing up Largo. You know.
What I don't like about the film is the pacing. And the thing, too, another thing, I don't care for the cinematography in the film. I think it's just not a very interesting looking film. Oh, by the way, that's another thing I want to mention. It is the first Bond film to be shot in scope, if I'm not mistaken.
I have no idea.
And I didn't feel it was very visually interesting. He goes to all these exotic locations, and I just thought it was very blandly photographed. I saw Sean Connery look bored in parts. I mean, there's some scenes he really is good in it. Some scenes you can really feel like he's just beginning to get bored of the character, which I think you can agree with me on to a certain extent.
He started to look, but there's still things there where he's just utterly charming. Like I love that scene where he discovers Fiona Volpe in his bathtub. And she asks him, could you give me something to put on? And he just gives her shoes. That's a great moment. He just like sits back and looks at her. Quintessential Connery.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I consider Thunderball to be a mixed bag. You like it more than I did, and I think
it's the movie as a child. It was my favorite of Connery's. It was the one that I conjured up the most good memories of.
Well, that'll bring us to our next Connery Bond, which was his last Bond film for a while, and it's a film that was shockingly written by Roald Dahl.
Well,
yes,
the original script.
Yeah, by Roald Dahl of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory fame. And
James and the Giant Peach.
Yep, and
The Witches.
And the film.
But it was not used. The shooting script was not used.
Let me finish my introduction here. That it was directed by at the time. I forget his name. Louis Gilbert.
Louis Gilbert,
who returns later on in the film to direct 2 more Bonds. The film concerns Spectre going into outer space and hijacking many space missions and holding people for ransom.
Well, and kidnapping shuttles.
Yes, and at the time, it set a record for the most expensive set. In fact, the set was equal to the amount of the first Dr. No film, which is at $1 million. The set by Ken Adam is amazing. Unfortunately, I feel this film is a very weak entry in the Bond series because this one, Sean Connery really does look bored out of his mind.
And apparently he really was. Apparently he hated being in Japan. He just was so ready to stop being Bond when they started shooting. And to me, it looks it. He kind of sleepwalks through the film. This was like the first Bond film that kind of really derailed from the book series. You know, up until that point, I mean, even Goldfinger, you can argue, had some semblance to the original novel it was based on. But You Only Live Twice was the first Bond film where it's like, okay, we're just not going to film the novels. We're just going to take the titles and just do this like spectacular Bond thing. Because the book is so cool, but the problem is, You Only Live Twice, the book happens after On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And at this point, they weren't, doing any continuity. And so with You Only Live Twice, I mean, there's interesting things in You Only Live Twice, some good lines, but I find it, that final battle in the underground volcano, to me, is just the best scene in the movie. But I've seen it like so many times, and I don't find anything up to that point all that really memorable. There's great sets.
Well,
I think the photography's great, and I think the sets are great.
Enough bashing this film. This is my favorite Connery. It's my favorite Connery film.
Get out of here.
It is awesome. I love it. It is. I'm wondering I've never read the Roald Dahl script. I don't know if it's available or not.
He's credited though, and
but I think a lot of his imagination went into this film, whether he was credited or not. With story by credit or whatever. I don't think he was given a story by credit on that, and I don't think he was given.
No, he was. If you see the movie, it says screenplay by Roald Dahl.
Oh, okay.
He's the only one, if I'm not mistaken, actually gets a credit. Someone else might have rewritten it, but they don't get a credit.
See, I heard they weren't using his shooting script. I knew that.
Well, a lot of his concepts were used in the film. So.
But I think I absolutely adore it. I love finally seeing Blofeld's face after just seeing him stroking the cat, Donald Pleasance. The wonderful Donald Pleasance. Even though it changed over time, it became Charles Gray. It was...
Telly Savalas.
Yeah, Telly Savalas, exactly.
The Donald Pleasance Blofeld was the inspiration for Dr. Evil, by the way.
Yeah.
Somewhat.
There you go. And I think that, along with Lorne Michaels.
Yes.
But I think that I loved... This is where I started loving the surreal aspects of Bond. I just absolutely adored them. And the ninja battle at the end, I didn't even realize that they were ninjas at the end. I loved Tiger, his ally. I loved
Tiger Kanaga.
Yeah, but they called him Tiger Tiger. And then I love when they brought out the helicopter kit, which was they brought out the team of guys with the bamboo suitcases, and Tiger Tiger's like, oh, what do you got there, Bond? A toy? And then he assembles it, and it's amazing. And then once again, Spectre's in full force.
Well, I gotta say, we only have like a minute or two left, but I want to say this one has one of the best theme songs in a movie.
Yes,
I love
I
the
agree
theme
with
song.
you. I'm glad you
I
brought
love
that
it.
up.
Nancy Sinatra.
Not Sinatra, and I say it's beautifully shot in Japan. Gorgeous
Cinematography
It's
is
amazing.
one of the best, some of the best cinematography in the series, actually.
And the one thing I don't care for, and I think the story's a little preposterous. Talk about preposterous, going into outer space and all this, and also I thought faking James Bond's death, and then for him to pretend that he's Japanese is kind of pushing it.
Okay, I agree with you on that. But the idea of space, the way they did it though, wasn't that over the top.
Well, you see, I didn't mind that. I didn't mind any of the fantastic elements of it. It just seemed like this was the first Bond film that they did not adapt from a novel. They just came up with their own thing. The only thing that's similar. Are we done?
We're out of time. Well, anyway,
we'll
tune
see.
in next week,
Yeah.
and we'll continue this conversation. And we will continue with one of my favorite films on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
More
Until
Connery, more Bond.
then. Until then.
Straight on this.
It says that in the
By
documentary.
the way, yeah, Eric is our resident James
This
Bond
man is a
expert. Even
official
though we're
aficionado.
huge fans, he's the expert.
Go ahead, Eric.
No. What they wanted, this is the deal. Thunderball was supposed to be the first James Bond movie, but this was before Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman were even involved in it. What happened was Kevin McClory, I forgot who the other producer, came to Ian Fleming and said, we want to make a James Bond film. And at the time, Bond was sort of a popular fictional character. And they decided to get together, and they wrote a script together, which turned out to be Thunderball. Now, what happened was the film fell apart, and Fleming needed a new idea for a novel. So his next novel became Thunderball, hence why all this legal wrangling went on. Since then, he kind of did the novel without getting any
Hi, I'm Edwin Samuelson, and welcome to the CineFiles. This week, it's a very, very special.
been inspired by James Bond.
And let me tell you, James Bond was more influential back in the old days than you think, because when Alfred Hitchcock made North by Northwest, he went on record by saying that was how he would do James Bond.
North by Northwest came out in 1957.
I know, but when he was interviewed later, when
Oh,
they
I
talked
see what
about
you're
him
saying.
doing a Bond film, he said, I have already did my Bond, and it was North by Northwest.
Wow. And also I want to say about
No,
James
he was a seer.
You're wrong.
Another thing interesting about James Bond, I guess you could say, it started a new genre, the super spy movies. In fact, there were so many knockoffs. In fact, there was a film, I don't bet you guys didn't know this, that Sean Connery's brother actually played a secret agent in. I don't know the name of the film.
Operation Kid Brother, I think it was called. Neil Connery.
Hey, if you can't get Sean Connery,
do I know
get the
that?
next best.
I'm
And
embarrassed.
the kid actor in it that played his sidekick was Don Swayze.
That's an inside joke for some people, and it's not very funny. So
And you're laughing.
I'm
you
laughing.
son of a
I'm
bitch.
laughing in pity of myself. All right. Well, anyway, the first film.
Matt Helm was a knockoff.
Yes, he was.
Man Called Flint.
Yeah, our man Flint
with
man
and
James
like Flint.
Coburn and Michael Caine, respectively. But the first film actually is Dr. No. The first film that Henry Saltzman and is it Albert
Cubby Broccoli.
Cubby Broccoli wanted to film was Thunderball, but they had problems with the rights, which we'll get to later. So they decided to film Dr. No with a unknown actor.
That is incorrect.
That is incorrect.
I'm going to set the record.
Special show will be the first of a 3-part series on the new James Bond series. Well, not the new James Bond series, but it's going to tie in with the new James Bond film, which is Casino Royale, and the new DVD releases of all the first 20 films of James Bond. But before I begin, I want to introduce my panel. To my left, Mr. Eric Cohen, and to his left, Mr. Michael Foltz. But anyway, before we begin, let's get ready to talk about, well, actually, let's begin. The James Bond series. Let's start out. James Bond, the original superhero, I guess say secret agent who started...
Super spy.
The original
super spy.
action hero.
Yeah, Bond. I'd probably say the longest running film series
Quite
in
possibly
history.
the most influential film character.
Definitely up there. Everyone has parodied James Bond at one point or another.
There isn't an action film that hasn't